The last night of 2014 in Jackson, Mississippi, was a cocktail of humidity, firecrackers, and freestyles. The city's underground hip-hop crowd had gathered in a graffiti-soaked parking lot behind an abandoned diner, where the air pulsed with bass, sweat, and bravado. Some came to spit bars, others to drink, and watch egos clash like titans. But no one expected that night would be remembered for something more than rhyme and rhythm. Under the buzzing floodlights, Kayla Brooks stepped onto the makeshift stage, a cracked slab of concrete between two parked Chevys. She was 26, slim, deep brown skin glistening with confidence, eyes sharp as a blade. Her cornrows were tucked beneath a black snapback, and a silver microphone tattoo peeked from beneath her hoodie sleeve. She wasn't just there to rap. She came to make noise. "I'm not here to be cute," she said, eyeing the crowd. "I'm here to make him bleed." Lyrically, the crowd erupted. The guys laughed at first. Then they listened. Kayla's voice hit like a warning shot, clear, biting, and laced with venom. Her bars were fearless, calling out hypocrisy, mocking fragile egos, and weaving wordplay that had even the DJs nodding in disbelief. And standing across from her were three men who didn't like being embarrassed, especially not in front of cameras, especially not by a woman. Tyrone Mitchell was the first opponent. Stocky, mid-30s, with a scar that curved from his ear to his jawline, like punctuation on a threat. He launched into his set aggressive and loud, but Kayla dismantled him line by line, flipping his own words against him. Then came Darnell Griffin. Taller, meaner, with the dead eyes of someone who'd seen too many fights and survived too few. His insults were crude. Kayla's comebacks were surgical. The crowd loved her. Last was Rico Evans, barely into his 20s and desperate to prove he belonged. His verses came fast but messy. Kayla stood still, let him tire himself out, then whispered into the mic. "You came at me like fire, but I'm water with rhythm. You're trying to roar. I drown you with wisdom." The place exploded. Phones were out. Strangers hugged. Kayla raised both hands, not in arrogance, but in victory. She smiled wide, teeth white under the lot lights, heart pounding like a war drum. But not everyone was cheering. Off to the side, the three men stood together, stone-faced. Tyrone's jaw flexed. Darnell lit a cigarette with a hand that trembled just enough to notice. And Rico? He stared at Kayla like he didn't understand what had just happened, like he'd been robbed of something he thought was his. "She humiliated us," Tyrone muttered. "No," Darnell said, exhaling smoke. "She disrespected us." Behind them, the fireworks screamed into the sky. Ahead of them, something far darker was about to ignite. And Kayla Brooks, the girl who set the mic on fire, had no idea that winning that battle had just painted a target on her back. In the days that followed the New Year's Eve battle, Kayla Brooks became an underground sensation in Jackson. Clips of her performance, especially her final verse against Rico, spread like wildfire across social media. Local hip-hop blogs labeled her the Queen of Concrete. Strangers stopped her at gas stations. A producer from Atlanta even slid into her DMs asking for demos. But three men didn't find any of it amusing. They weren't just embarrassed that night. They were erased. Tyrone Mitchell had been somebody once. A self-styled OG who controlled the mic and the street in equal parts, back when he was rolling with the Southside Kings in the early 2000s. Prison changed him, or maybe it didn't. The man who stood in that lot the night of the battle had the same stone-carved face he wore the day he was convicted of sexual battery at age 17. Tyrone had built his reputation on dominance. Over other men, over women, over anyone who dared to talk back. But that night, a woman half his size gutted him with nothing but a mic and a grin. And worse, she did it publicly. He didn't sleep well afterward. Kept replaying the moment when the crowd turned on him, laughing, clapping as Kayla's words cut through the air. "She made you look soft," Darnell had told him a few days later, his voice low. "Shut the hell up," Tyrone snapped, though the words tasted like truth. Darnell Griffin didn't like crowds. He liked control. He had a history of bar fights and unpaid traffic tickets, lived out of a rusted Ford F-150, and kept a sawed-off shotgun in the glove compartment. He didn't laugh often, but he remembered Slights forever. Darnell hadn't said much after the battle. He just stared at Kayla during her verse, fists clenched, jaw ticking. Not because of what she said, hell, he barely processed the lyrics, but because the audience didn't look at him anymore. They used to flinch when he walked past. Now they were looking through him. She didn't win, he told himself. She showed off. But deep down, his ego had taken a hit, and Darnell didn't have the wiring to let that go. Rico Evans was the wild card. Youngest of the three, barely 22, and constantly chasing approval like a dog chasing its tail. He'd grown up in and out of foster homes, always on the edge of being wanted and discarded. Tyrone was the closest thing he'd ever had to a mentor, or a big brother, or a father. After the battle, Rico watched Kayla's video go viral from his phone while sitting in his room in his aunt's trailer. The comments hit him harder than the crowd that night. That boy didn't even land a punch. She cooked all three of them, especially that last one. What was his name again? He saw his name turn into a joke. A meme. A punchline. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Still, there was a flicker of guilt. Rico had liked Kayla. Her energy. The way she didn't apologize for taking space in a world that was mostly male and mostly angry. But that admiration curdled quickly under the heat of Tyrone's resentment. A week after the battle, the three of them met up behind a shuttered gas station on the outskirts of town. It was raining lightly, a dull, misty rain that soaked into jackets and made skin itch. Tyrone leaned against the hood of Darnell's truck, arms crossed. "We can't let that ride." Darnell didn't respond at first. He just stared down the road, lips tight, chewing a toothpick like it owed him money. Finally, Rico asked the question that had been haunting him. "What are we going to do?" Tyrone's voice was calm. Too calm. "We're going to remind her where she stands." Rico blinked. "Like jump her?" Tyrone looked over. "You think this is a schoolyard? She humiliated all three of us. On camera. She made fools out of us. Ain't nobody going to respect us again unless we make an example." Darnell nodded slowly. "Something that can't be posted and laughed at." Rico hesitated. His gut twisted. "I don't know, man. You in or out?" Tyrone snapped. "This ain't about rap no more. It's about survival." Silence stretched. Then Rico nodded. He didn't know what he was agreeing to, not really. But the thought of being excluded scared him more than whatever line they were about to cross. That night, Tyrone texted Kayla from a burner phone under a fake name. Said he was an Atlanta producer, impressed with her freestyle, and wanted to hear more. Asked if she'd be down for a quick freestyle session in his car to record some vocals. It would be raw, underground, real. Kayla read the message. Her instincts flared, but so did her ambition. She had just gone viral. Opportunities like this didn't fall out of the sky. So she replied, "What time?" It was just after 11 p.m. when Kayla Brooks zipped up her bomber jacket, slipped her phone in her back pocket, and stepped outside. The January air in Jackson was brisk, but not brutal. She had done her hair into a tight ponytail and kept her gold hoop earrings small. Nothing flashy, just focused. Tonight could be the night something big started. Maybe not a record deal, but momentum? Yeah, she felt that in her chest. The address the producer sent was a vacant parking lot behind an old movie theater on the south end of town. Dimly lit. No traffic. The kind of place you wouldn't hang out in unless you had a reason or a weapon. Still, Kayla's gut said go. She fought harder to be heard than most ever realized. She was used to people doubting her, telling her no. This felt like the start of a yes. A black Chevy Tahoe pulled up slowly as she arrived. Tinted windows. Beats thumping low from inside. The front passenger window rolled down. "Yo," the driver said, voice low and smooth. "You K?" "Yeah." "You the dude from Atlanta?" "Yeah." "Name's Trey. You cool to spit some stuff right now?" "I brought a recorder in the whip. Real underground style." She hesitated. "Just a beat." "You alone?" she asked. He smiled. "I got my engineer in the back. He don't bite." The rear door opened, and she saw a shadow shift inside. It was too dark to tell who, but the outline looked young. Small, not threatening. Kayla nodded once, got in. The door clicked shut, and everything changed. As soon as she settled in the back seat, a hand jammed in her ribs, a cold, hard object pressing deep. "Don't scream," a voice whispered in her ear. not the driver's. She froze. Then she recognized it. Tyrone. What the hell is this? She barked, trying to twist toward the door. A second figure turned from the passenger seat. Darnell. Drive. Tyrone ordered Rico, who was behind the wheel. His face pale, eyes wide. He wouldn't look at her. Is this a joke? Kayla snapped. Y'all serious right now? Tyrone leaned in, his breath hot and sour. You thought you could embarrass us? Make us into clowns in front of the whole damn city. I embarrassed you 'cause you weren't good enough, she shot back, heart racing but voice steady. That ain't on me. That's on your weak-ass bars. He slapped her. Hard. Open palm. Her lips split. You still got something to say, he growled. Kayla stared him down through swelling eyes. Yeah, you a punk. All three of you. Darnell turned in his seat. She got a mouth on her. Tyrone cocked the gun in his lap. Let's see if she keeps talking in the dark. They drove out of the city, past neighborhoods, past gas stations, into the pine woods, where the roads narrowed and the streetlights stopped. Kayla stayed quiet now, counting every turn, every street sign, try to log direction in her head. If she got out, when she got out, she'd remember everything. Eventually, they pulled off onto a dirt road, swallowed by brush and gravel. Rico parked. Get out, Tyrone said. Kayla didn't move. He grabbed her arm and yanked. I said move. The ground crunched under her boots as they led her into the clearing. No houses, no lights, just trees and silence. She knew what was coming. She could see it in Tyrone's face. Not anger, hunger. Take her jacket, Darnell muttered. No, Rico said suddenly. This is enough. Man, she's scared. Just scare her, right? That's what we said. Tyrone turned slowly toward him. Scare her. She ain't worth a murder charge, man. You think she's going to stay quiet if we let her go? Darnell snapped. She's going to put us all in jail. Kayla's hands clenched at her sides. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed locked on Tyrone's. You do this, she said. You'll see me again. In court. On the news. You'll see me when they put you under the ground. Tyrone raised the gun. I won't see nothing. Then the night exploded in fire and screams. The first shot ripped through Kayla's thigh. She didn't scream. She gasped, her legs buckling under her. Her knees hit the cold, rocky dirt, and her hands slapped the ground hard. Blood soaked into her jeans within seconds. She looked up at Tyrone, eyes wide, breath shallow, the taste of metal in her mouth. You still got something to say now? Tyrone snarled, standing over her, the gun hanging loose in his hand like a final period at the end of a death sentence. Kayla tried to crawl backward, but Darnell kicked her shoulder, flipping her onto her back. A second shot tore through her abdomen. Then a third hit her side. The world slowed. The stars above blurred into smears of light. She could feel her body shutting down piece by piece, her vision dimming, her breath catching, but her mind was still screaming, fight, move, live. I said light her up, Tyrone barked. Rico hesitated. He stood near the car, a red gas can gripped in his trembling hand. The moment stretched. She's still breathing. Tyrone shouted, do it. I didn't sign up for this. Rico yelled, you signed up the second you got in the car. Darnell snapped, grabbing the can and dousing Kayla with gasoline. She coughed as the bitter liquid soaked her hair, her jacket, her skin. Her eyes burned. Her wounds burned. Everything burned, even before the flame. Then Tyrone struck a match. A single flicker. Small. Orange. Innocent looking. He dropped it on her chest. Whoosh. The fire erupted with a deafening roar, devouring air and flesh in seconds. Kayla screamed, finally screamed, as the flames consumed her hoodie and reached for her face. Rico turned away, tears running down his cheeks. Darnell watched in silence, jaw clenched. Tyrone? He just stood there, watching. Let's go, he muttered. And just like that, they turned their backs on her. The car door slammed. The engine started. Headlights cut through the woods for a brief moment, then disappeared. Kayla Brooks was left to die, but death didn't take her. Not that night. She rolled. Her body, broken, bloodied, on fire, somehow found the will to move. She flailed, twisting, forcing herself into the wet dirt, smothering the flames that clung to her like a second skin. Her fingers dug into the gravel, her cheek pressed into the mud, and her screams became whispers. Don't stop. Don't stop. She couldn't see. Smoke clouded her eyes. Her left leg wouldn't move. Her right arm felt like it had detached. But something inside her, something ancient and burning and louder than the fire, kept whispering one word. Crawl. She didn't know how long she dragged herself through the woods. Time melted, pain numbed. The sound of the wind in the trees was the only company she had. At one point, she hallucinated her mother's voice calling her home. At another, she felt her father's hands lifting her chin, telling her to keep going. Eventually, the trees thinned. Then she saw it, headlights in the distance. A road. Please, please. She clawed her way forward, each inch a war. Her fingernails cracked. Her skin peeled. Her voice had gone silent, but her soul was howling. And just as she reached the edge of the road, she collapsed. Marvin Clark, a 52-year-old truck driver on his way back from Memphis, thought he saw something strange by the roadside. A bundle of clothes? A dead animal? Then it moved. He slammed on the brakes, heart hammering. The truck screeched to a stop. He jumped out and ran over. What he saw haunted him for the rest of his life. A young woman, naked, burnt, bleeding, barely breathing. Her face was unrecognizable. Her hands were blistered, fingers curled in agony. Her voice was a hoarse rasp. Help, she mouthed. They tried to kill me. Marvin called 911 with shaking hands. At Jackson Memorial Hospital, ER nurses gasped when Kayla was wheeled in. She was clinging to life by a thread. Doctors counted 10 gunshot wounds, third-degree burns over 40% of her body, multiple fractured ribs, and a punctured lung. Surgeons rushed her into emergency trauma surgery. She coded twice on the table. They revived her both times. One nurse whispered to another, "How is she still alive?" "She's not ready to go," the other replied. "Somebody's got plans for her." 2 days later, Kayla opened her eyes. Detective Camille Harris was sitting by her bedside, notebook in hand, eyes red from no sleep. A black woman in her 40s, with a calm authority and the heart of a mother. She leaned in close when she saw Kayla stir. "You're safe," Camille said gently. "You're in the hospital. We've been waiting." Kayla couldn't speak, but her eyes locked with Camille's. And then, slowly, Kayla nodded. She was ready to talk. Within hours, she began identifying her attackers, first with gestures, then with breathy whispers. Tyrone Mitchell, Darnell Griffin, Rico Evans. She remembered everything. Their voices, their clothes, the sound of the gunshots, the burning gasoline, even the license plate on the back of the SUV. She told Camille where it happened, what they said, how they left her to die. And Camille listened, not just as a cop, but as a woman who knew what it meant to be silenced and underestimated. "You just stay strong," Camille told her. "Let us do the rest." As detectives swarmed the crime scene in the woods, they found shell casings, charred fabric, blood in the dirt. Forensics confirmed Kayla's DNA. They pulled traffic cam footage, gas station security clips, and even found the gas can in Rico's cousin's garage. Everything lined up. Camille Harris stared at the evidence on her board back at precinct headquarters. And then she whispered, "We got you, baby girl. We got all three of them." Detective Camille Harris didn't waste time. By the third day after Kayla's miraculous survival, the Jackson Police Department had 3 names, 3 faces, and a mission: bring them in, alive or not breathing. Tyrone Mitchell was the first target. He was arrogant enough to stay in town, still strutting around like nothing had happened. Maybe he thought Kayla had died. Maybe he didn't care. But what he didn't expect was Camille pulling up on him outside a corner liquor store, badge in one hand, Glock in the other. "Hands where I can see them, Tyrone," she shouted, her voice booming down the block like thunder. Tyrone blinked, confused, then smirked. "You got the wrong guy, lady." Camille stepped closer, eyes locked. "Tell that to the girl you try to burn alive." Tyrone froze. The smirk vanished. He tried to run. Big mistake. 2 officers tackled him within seconds. As they cuffed him, Camille leaned down, whispering into his ear, "She's alive, and she remembers everything." Darnell Griffin went into hiding. Word had reached the streets fast. Kayla wasn't just alive, she was talking. He abandoned his truck, ditched his phone, and holed up in his cousin's hunting cabin about 20 miles north. But Camille didn't need a signal to find Coward. She followed the trail of his old charges, known associates, and a pawn shop owner who remembered him trying to sell a gold chain that smelled like gasoline. SWAT moved in at 3 a.m. Darnell opened the door, bleary-eyed and barefoot, a shotgun in one hand. He barely had time to raise it. They hit him with a beanbag round to the chest and took him down hard. "You should have stayed quiet that night," Camille said as he lay on the floor groaning. "But you wanted to play fire. Now you get to burn for real." In court, Rico Evans was the only one who cried when they came for him. He didn't resist, didn't even speak. When Camille entered the interrogation room, he was sitting there, shoulders slumped, eyes swollen, his hands trembling in the cuffs. "She's really alive?" he asked softly. Camille didn't blink. "Yeah, and she's stronger than all three of you combined." Rico swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I didn't want to. I swear to God, I didn't want to do it. I told them." She leaned forward, quiet but firm. "But you stayed. You poured the gas. You watched. I was scared. So was she. But she still fought." Rico said nothing else. He just wept. Camille returned to the hospital later that night. Kayla was out of surgery again, her fifth in just 10 days. She was stitched up, swollen, skin grafted, bruised beyond recognition. But her eyes? Still sharp, still alive. Camille sat by her side and took her hand gently. "They're all in custody," she said. "Every single one." Kayla's lips trembled, tears welling in her bloodshot eyes. She mouthed a single word, "Thank you." But Camille shook her head. "Don't thank me. You did this. You crawled out of hell and told us where to look. We just followed your light." Outside the hospital room, Jackson was starting to change. News reports were calling Kayla a miracle, a survivor. But inside that room, under the sterile white light, she was still just a woman who refused to die quietly. And justice? It had only just begun knocking. The day Kayla Brooks entered the courtroom, a hush swept over the crowd like a tide pulling back before a storm. She walked slowly, each step deliberate, her body wrapped in layers of compression garments and healing skin. A cane steadied her right side. Her face, though scarred, carried an unflinching defiance that not even 10 bullets and a firestorm could erase. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. But Kayla's eyes were fixed on one thing: the three men seated at the defense table. Tyrone, Darnell, Rico. They all looked different now. Stripped of their street armor. No swagger. No noise. Just orange jumpsuits and cuffed hands. Kayla didn't blink. She didn't look away. The trial was a media firestorm. State of Mississippi versus Mitchell, Griffin, and Evans drew national attention. Every major outlet, from the Jackson Clarion-Ledger to CNN, had a reporter in the room. Survivors of violent crime, advocates for black women, and local rappers alike showed up daily to support Kayla, many wearing shirts that read, "She lived. They will answer." The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Leon Mercer, opened strong. "This case," she said, "is not just about attempted murder. It's about ego. It's about three men who could not stand to see a woman rise above them. So they tried to destroy her, burn her, erase her. But she lived, and now they must face what's left of the fire." The defense tried everything. Tyrone's lawyer claimed Kayla had provoked them, suggesting the freestyle battle led to tensions that escalated. Darnell's attorney tried to separate his client from the fire, saying he didn't personally shoot or burn her. Rico's defense leaned heavily on duress. He was manipulated, too weak to walk away. But then Kayla took the stand, and all their excuses collapsed like wet cardboard. The courtroom went silent as she was sworn in. Her voice was raspy, permanent damage to her throat from smoke inhalation, but it carried. Each word sliced clean through the air. "I want you to look at me," she said to the jury. "Don't look away." She told them everything, from the moment she got in that car to the moment Tyrone struck the first match. Her voice didn't waver, even when she described the agony of being shot while begging for her life. "I could smell my own flesh burning," she said, her hands shaking on the witness box. "I remember thinking, this is it. This is where it ends. She paused, letting the silence settle. But it didn't end, because I didn't let them have the last word. The courtroom was still. Even the judge blinked twice, struggling to maintain composure. When cross-examination came, the defense tried to rattle her, suggested inconsistencies, pressed her on memory. She never flinched. "I remember everything," she said flatly. "I remember Tyrone laughing when I screamed. I remember Darnell pouring the gas. And I remember Rico crying like a child, but still watching me burn." Gas rose. Rico broke down in court. Again, Kayla just sat still, unshaken. Forensic evidence backed every word of her testimony. Ballistics matched the bullets to a weapon found in Darnell's truck. Gasoline traces matched the can recovered from Rico's cousin's garage. Rico's browser history showed searches like gasoline burns and survival just 2 days after the attack. But it was her words, not the science, that changed everything. As the trial neared its end, ADA Mercer addressed the jury. "You've seen the evidence. You've heard the doctors. You know what happened. But what matters most is that she told you. In her own words, with her own voice. That's not just testimony. That's truth carved in fire." The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, you could hear hearts pounding beneath dress shirts and blouses. "All rise," the bailiff called. Kayla stood, supported by her cane. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, guilty. On the charge of arson, guilty. And again, for all three. Tyrone clenched his jaw. Darnell dropped his head. Rico broke down in full sobs, shaking uncontrollably. Judge Willard Harmon delivered the sentence the following day. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For all three. Outside the courthouse, Kayla stood at the top of the steps, facing a sea of flashing cameras and uplifted fists. Someone in the crowd shouted, "You're a hero." But Kayla shook her head. "I'm not a hero," she said into the microphones. "I'm a survivor. And there's a difference. Heroes don't have to live with the scars. Survivors do." Then she turned and walked away, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a woman who had already won her war. The months after the verdict felt like quiet after a storm, but not peace. Peace didn't come easy when your body ached in the cold, when your skin pulled in places it used to stretch, and when mirrors reminded you daily of what fire tried to take. Kayla Brooks didn't retreat. She reconstructed. Her hospital stay stretched into rehabilitation. From burn clinics to physical therapy, every step she took felt like walking on broken glass. There were mornings she cried into her pillow, not because of the pain, but because of the rage. Rage that it had happened. Rage that so many women, especially women of color, didn't survive what she had. But even in pain, Kayla didn't hide. If she couldn't rap from a stage yet, she'd speak from a podium. Her first public appearance came at a local women's shelter in Jackson, 6 months after the trial. She wore a high-neck blouse to cover her chest grafts, a head wrap around her healing scalp, and a single gold hoop in one ear. Her cane tapped softly as she walked to the microphone, and the room, packed with survivors, advocates, and silent sobbing women, fell still. She began with a whisper. "I used to think I had to fight to be heard, that I had to be louder, sharper, better than every man in the room just to get an ounce of respect." She paused, scanning the room. "Then I found out that even when you win, some men still think your voice is a threat, and they'll try to silence it. Forever." Her words landed heavy, but she didn't cry. "I'm standing here not because I got lucky, but because I refuse to let their fear be the end of my story." By the time she finished, half the room was standing, clapping through tears. Kayla had transformed, from battle rapper to survivor, from victim to warrior, and her story was just beginning. Word spread fast. National news programs started requesting interviews. A producer from The View called. Ellen's people left a voicemail. A documentary crew from Atlanta offered to follow her journey. But Kayla said no to most. Not because she didn't have something to say, but because she wasn't interested in becoming a headline. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted change. So she did it her way. She founded the Phoenix Mike Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting Black and brown survivors of violent crime, especially those who had been silenced, ignored, or dismissed by the legal system. The organization began small, just a few volunteers and borrowed office space above a beauty salon. But it grew quickly. Donations poured in. Survivors from as far as Baltimore and Oakland wrote letters thanking Kayla for giving them the courage to speak. She made weekly visits to high schools, women's prisons, and recovery centers. She listened. She taught self-defense. She even started a writing workshop called Spit It Out, where survivors used poetry and rap to reclaim their voice. But behind all the impact, Kayla still had battles of her own. There were nights when she woke up screaming, flames still flickering behind her eyelids. There were days when her reconstructed skin cracked and bled from stress. And there were moments, like at the mall or on a city bus, when someone would stare too long, and she'd feel herself shrink. She missed her old face. She missed her old confidence. But she refused to miss her life. 2 years after the attack, Kayla returned to the underground rap scene, not to compete, but to host. The event was held at the very same lot where she'd won the battle that almost cost her everything. This time, there were lights, security, a stage. A crowd of over 500 came out. When she stepped on stage, the applause nearly drowned her out. She smiled, real, wide, and unafraid. She tapped the mic. "I'm still here," she said. Cheers erupted, and I brought some new fire with me. She nodded to a young girl in a hoodie who stepped up to battle, microphone shaking in her hands. Kayla watched from the sidelines as the girl rapped, raw, furious, unpolished. And in that moment, she saw herself again. Not the scars, not the pain, just the power. Later that night, a journalist asked her if she'd ever return to rap full-time. Kayla looked out over the crowd, where survivors hugged each other and young girls stood taller than ever. She answered simply, "I already did." Kayla released an independent album the following year titled Ashes to Anthem. It wasn't just music, it was testimony. 10 tracks, 10 wounds, 10 ways to rise. The lead single, 10 Shots Still Standing, went viral on TikTok, especially among young women who used the lyrics to caption posts about healing. "You burn my skin slash, but not my name. You tried to kill slash, but fed the flame. Now every scar I wear's a chain slash I broke, not war. I'm the storm that came." By the 5th anniversary of her attack, Kayla Brooks had become more than a survivor. She was a movement. Mississippi lawmakers introduced a bill named in her honor, the Brooks Act, which aimed to increase sentencing for attempted murder in hate crimes and guaranteed trauma support for survivors during trials. And that old parking lot behind the diner? It was renamed Kayla's Lot. Where once blood was spilled, now poetry echoed. Rhymes healed, and young girls freestyled in the very place one woman had nearly died, only to rise again, stronger than any fire meant to silence her. 5 years to the day after she was left burning and bleeding in a dirt clearing outside Jackson, Kayla Brooks stood in front of the Mississippi State Capitol in a tailored black blazer and flats that still made her limp. Her scars peaked just slightly above her blouse collar, no longer hidden, no longer shameful. They were part of her armor now. She wasn't here to perform, not to rap, not to speak as a survivor. She was here as something else, a leader. The Brooks Act, the senator said into the microphone beside her, isn't just policy. It's a declaration. That black women's pain is not invisible. That justice can have a name. And in this case, that name is Kayla. The crowd applauded. Behind the podium, Kayla exhaled slowly, grounding herself in the weight of the moment. Then she stepped forward. "My name," she began, "was almost buried that night, along with my voice, my story, my future." She paused, letting her words land. But here's the thing about trying to bury someone who hasn't finished speaking. You just make their voice louder. There was a fire in her eyes now. Not rage, not even pride. Something deeper. Purpose. "This bill doesn't erase what happened to me," she continued, "but it makes damn sure it means something." After the ceremony, Kayla walked alone along the Capitol steps. She carried no entourage, no camera crew, just herself and the wind rustling through her jacket. A teenage girl approached her hesitantly, holding a notebook. "Miss Brooks?" the girl asked. Kayla smiled gently. "Yeah, that's me. I wrote something," the girl stammered. "About what happened to me. About not staying silent anymore." Kayla looked the girl in the eyes. "You don't have to give it to me. But if you want to, I'll read it." The girl handed it over, and Kayla tucked the notebook carefully into her bag. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You're already stronger than most people I know." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be like you." Kayla didn't blink. "Don't be like me. Be louder. Be bolder. Go further." That night, in her small home just outside the city, Kayla sat on her porch with a notebook of her own. She watched the sun dip behind the trees, her body sore, but her spirit still standing. She opened to a blank page and wrote the title, "The Day They Tried to Burn Me, and the Fire Failed." Then, in smooth strokes, she began the first line. "They tried to kill my voice, but all they did was make it permanent." Because in the end, Kayla Brooks wasn't just a name on a bill, or a woman with scars. She was a living anthem, and her song was far from over. Years passed, but the story of Kayla Brooks never faded. It didn't drift quietly into the back pages of the local news. It grew into a ripple that became a wave, crashing through courtrooms, classrooms, and the hearts of people who'd never known what it meant to fight for breath and still sing afterward. By the time Kayla turned 35, she had been featured in Time, Essence, and on the cover of Rolling Stone, scarred and radiant, standing in front of a mural of herself painted across the old diner wall where her freestyle battle began. But Kayla never let the spotlight blind her from what mattered. She kept visiting burn wards and shelters. She sat quietly with women who couldn't yet say what happened to them. She ran writing workshops in prisons. She still answered every letter from a survivor with her own handwriting. "I can't take your pain," she often said, "but I can show you what's on the other side of it." One autumn afternoon, she returned to the woods where it all happened. The trees were taller now. The dirt road had been closed off by the county and marked with a sign. "This ground is sacred. Here, a woman survived what should have ended her. Now it ends silence instead." Kayla stood in the clearing, alone. No cameras, no speeches. She knelt, touched the dirt where she had once bled, and whispered, "You didn't win." Then she stood, walked out of the woods, and never looked back. On the 10th anniversary of the attack, a theater in Jackson hosted the premiere of a documentary called Still Standing, the Kayla Brooks story. The final scene was simple. Kayla, in a studio, headphones on, rapping one last verse. Her voice, older now, deeper, earned through smoke and fire, delivered the final lines. "You thought I was ashes slash, but I was flint. Lit me up and I sparked the print. I'm what justice sounds like slash unafraid. The girl you try to burn slash now leads the parade." The screen faded to black, and in that darkened room, not a single soul moved. Then applause rose, not polite but roaring, not for the fire, but for the flame she became. There's something haunting about the quiet after survival, a stillness that follows the storm. For Kayla Brooks, that silence was never emptiness. It was the beginning of something louder than bullets, brighter than fire. A movement had risen from the ashes of her pain. But Kayla never once claimed to be its leader. She insisted she was just the proof. Proof that a woman can be burned, broken, left to die, and still rise, not just for herself, but for others. A year after the Still Standing documentary aired, Kayla received an invitation to speak at Harvard Law School. Not as a case study, not as a victim, but as a lecturer on survivor-centered justice reform. She stood before a sea of future prosecutors and defenders, looking every bit the professor in her tailored navy coat, her cane resting beside the podium. "What happened to me," she began, "was a crime. But what happened after, when the system believed me, when an officer sat by my bed instead of a press officer asking if I was provoking it, that was justice." She paused, scanning the faces of the next generation. And justice only matters if everyone gets it. Not just the loud, not just the rich, not just the women with microphones. They rose to their feet when she finished. Many had tears in their eyes. The following spring, Kayla launched the Scar Stories Fellowship, a program funding 10 young survivors each year to turn their stories into art, policy, or activism. She didn't just mentor them. She lived with them, listened, wrote beside them, laughed with them through healing, cried in moments no cameras ever caught. One girl, Aisha, 16, from Oakland, had survived a drive-by shooting. She told Kayla, "I didn't think I was ever going to feel pretty again." Kayla had taken her hands gently, looked her square in the eyes, and said, "Scars don't take away beauty. They give it context." Kayla was no longer the girl who walked onto a cracked concrete stage to prove herself through rhymes. She was the woman whose very existence proved something more radical. That survival wasn't the end goal. Reclamation was. She reclaimed her voice, her body, her story. And then she held out her hand and pulled others up beside her. Years later, during an interview on 60 Minutes, the host asked her, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? That you could go back and change it?" Kayla looked out the window for a long moment, then answered softly, "Of course I wish I hadn't been hurt. I wish those men had walked away instead of lighting that match. But what I've learned is, even when something tries to end you, you still have a say. You still get the last word." The interviewer leaned in. "And what's your last word?" Kayla turned back, eyes fierce, lips lifting in a slow, steady smile. "This," she said, "isn't the last word." Because Kayla Brooks didn't just change the conversation. She rewrote it. And for every woman who thought her voice was buried, Kayla was the sound of it rising again.